and as Hale said, I'm going to be telling you about the brain. I have two goals for this talk today. The first is to explain a little bit about how the brain works, and the second is to make a simple model of it. A very simple model. A very, very simple model. This is your brain. Not your brain, specifically the human brain. The brain was originally thought to be an organ just used for temperature regulation, mainly of the blood. Then, once psychiatrists and physicians figured out there were thoughts up there, they started entertaining the idea that the brain was run via liquid moving through tubes and chambers called ventricles in the brain. Nowadays, of course, we know that the brain is run by neurons, not tubes, and we also have a much better idea of what it can do. For example, the brain is the organ that monitors our circadian rhythm, or our internal sleep schedule. The human brain is also particularly good at forming associations between similar topics. And it does all this through our neurotransmitters, tiny chemical messengers that move in between neurons to relay electrical signals. Some neurotransmitters include endorphins, glutamate, serotonin, and what is probably the most well-known, dopamine. According to neuroscientists, what dopamine does is it effectively motivates our brain to complete tasks that have long-term rewards. That is, not just that assignment due tomorrow, but those projects that might take multiple days, weeks, or even months or years. However, I don't think I agree with the neuroscientists who say it works effectively. I can't focus on long-term tasks for more than 10 minutes and, well, I see. My original model was based on the assumption that everyone's brain works the same way. The functions are a list that every single person has. However, that's not actually true. I learned this in good old 2020 when my brother and I were both diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD. Now, since my original brain model was not quite accurate enough, I think it could use an update. Here we go. There's the brain we were describing earlier, and there's the ADHD brain. They have a couple more differences than the one I just explained. For example, while your average brain triggers the sleep-inducing hormone melatonin at around 9 p.m., the ADHD brain can be delayed by up to 90 minutes. It's not all bad, though. Oftentimes, people with ADHD are much more prone to and are much faster at divergent thinking, or put simply, thinking outside the box. So here we have it, the two types of brain. Except my brother has a larger ADHD medication prescription than me. And my dad still isn't diagnosed with ADHD, but still struggles with the dopamine thing sometimes. So maybe these dots aren't the best visual. So maybe some people can be, in a word, in between. So let's update our model. Here we go. There's my brain, and my brother's, and my dad's. This explains a lot. For example, why I tend to struggle with falling asleep, but I also don't fidget as much as some people with ADHD. And this explains why I associate 8 with the color blue. Except my brother doesn't do that, and nor does my dad. This is the brain. So my brother's there, again near ADHD, and there's my dad. And I'm on here too. Still closest to ADHD, but also a bit up towards... Oh. So that's why I associate 8 plus 8 with blue and purple and Mondays in the month of December and that girl I met in 6th grade. And why I made an entire presentation on the human brain. ASD stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. And just like ADHD, it has its own set of unique qualities. For example, the ASD brain is faster than most at pattern recognition. However, some people with ASD also experience an increased sensitivity to bright lights, loud sounds, and the like. So here we have it, our model of the ways the brain can work. You could be anywhere on this spectrum. At this point, you get where this is going. Our simple model isn't quite living up to its name anymore. The truth is, these brain types aren't dots on a map. They are the map. But now it must be finished, right? I've talked for far too long now. Everyone's probably bored to death, and how do I fit anxiety into this? Well, here. Lighter colors mark anxiety, darker colors mark depression. Except some people have both anxiety and depression. And there's a difference between feeling anxious or depressed and actually being diagnosed with anxiety or depression disorder, like social anxiety disorder, or SAD, and seasonal affective disorder, which is also called SAD. And wait, I need to fit OCD into this as well, obsessive compulsive disorder. And what about BD, BPD, NPD, ASPD, AVPD, DPD, DID, GAD, Tourette's, schizophrenia? There are actually 2 different types of schizophrenia I would need to fit in here somehow. And how on earth am I meant to fit brain injuries into all of this? I think we should go back to a simpler model. Here. It's not extensive, sure, but I think it works well enough. Except, of course, this one isn't actually accurate either. See, both me and my brother have ADHD, but he doesn't struggle with sleep the way that I do. And I tend to zone out more, but he tends to fidget more. One of the biggest misconceptions about psychological disorders is that if someone has one, they check every single box for every single symptom. And this just isn't true. Sure, my brother and I both have ADHD, but I struggle with sleep, and I tend to talk too quickly or too loudly. My brother, meanwhile, is athletic and energetic, and fidgets a lot when he has to sit at a desk for too long. I think we should go back to a simpler model. Here. It's not extensive, sure, but I think it works well enough. Except, of course, this one isn't actually accurate either. See, both me and my brother have ADHD, but he doesn't struggle with sleep the way that I do. And I tend to zone out more, but he tends to fidget more. One of the biggest misconceptions about psychological disorders is that if someone has one, they check every single box for every single symptom. And this just isn't true. Sure, my brother and I both have ADHD, but I struggle with sleep, and I tend to talk too quickly or too loudly. My brother, meanwhile, is athletic and energetic, and fidgets a lot when he has to sit at a desk for too long. But then we both really struggle with reining in our focus when we have to focus on just one topic. We have similarities and differences. So, lesson learned, making an accurate model of the brain is a bit too complex of a task for the limits of our understanding, and for the limits of my artistic capabilities. So, it leaves you wondering, how does the brain function? That's what I was trying to explain, remember? But the thing is, I've been studying psychology and psychological disorders ever since I got my own ADHD diagnosis 6 years ago. And it feels like the more I learn about these different ways the brain functions, the less of an idea I have of what's going on. Sure, we can write down a list of symptoms and give it a name, but not everyone, and almost no one in fact, is going to fit into those categories neatly. In fact, the brain is so complex and varying that I don't even know if the brain is an accurate term, because our brains work in vastly different ways. The way you think, the way you feel, even the way you feel love is different from other people. So, we're farther away from modeling the brain than ever. But hey, at least we know why. So now, I'd like to posit a question you might be wondering now. If every single brain functions differently, why are some people roped into definitions like ADHD and autism? When you think about it, it feels like those labels shouldn't exist. But that's not what I'm here to argue. A diagnosis for a psychological disorder is not a shame or a mark of being worse. It's also not an unnecessary border designed to separate people. Often, individuals with psychological disorders struggle physically, socially, and emotionally because of it. And a diagnosis, a list of symptoms, though not fully accurate, can be really helpful in overcoming these struggles. One way this is achieved is through medication. However, not everyone can benefit from medication, and it's very far from the only way a diagnosis helps. For example, in school, a diagnosis can help teachers know how best a student learns, or in what areas they might need more or less help than their classmates. In individuals, while they can't explain everything about you, they can provide a starting point toward better self-awareness and self-understanding. So no, I'm not here to tell you that psychiatrists are a scam. Because the real scam is these lessons that we keep telling ourselves, these things about the brain that we keep passing down, saying that the brain works like this. Because the brain doesn't work like this, or this, or this, or even this. The truth is, every brain everywhere is different. And as I'm sure you all know, having one is both a blessing and a curse. Some people need some additional help with those curses, but they have unique blessings too. And just because two people share a certain curse or a certain blessing doesn't mean they're identical. So the next time someone tells you that thinking, feeling, focusing, or having fun works a certain way, just remind them, for you, sure. For me, maybe. But for everybody, probably not. And that is my favorite part about the brain. Thank you.